Hello. A while ago I got one of these C-20T gimbals. These are made by a company called XF Robot, and there's also a CADX branded version that you can get, which I think is exactly the same thing, just with different branding. And I've put this on my OG Talon. You can see it up there. It's made for the DJI and Walk Snail digital HD cameras, of course, but I'm just using it with an analog because that's all I have at the moment. And it fits any 19mm wide camera quite easily, so that's just what I've been using. And I also stuck it on my large hexacopter for a little test as well. And eventually I'll get to using this with a digital system, of course, but just for now it's going to be analog. And at the time I did not have any goggles that have head tracking built in. I have since bought some HD0 goggles with head tracking built in, but what I was doing just to test it, this was also supposed to be a test of the PPM output feature of the iomixer, which is what's stuck on the goggles there. I actually made the PPM output feature years ago, but I'd never tested it properly, so I had to do a test, and this video is just going to be a little record of that test, basically. So what we have here is a little ground signal and power coming out into this wire, which is going to regular stereo jack like that. So we've got, I think it's ground at the base and then power, and then the signal on the tip there. And that was going to go into a little modification that I made on my FlySky radio. So the idea is that the head tracker will input PPM signal to the trainer port there, but rather than using that plug, I'm using this one here, which I added, which is basically the same as the trainer port plug. It's just using the same connections as are coming out here, but they're coming out here. And I thought that was a clever idea, but I actually killed one of my iomixers, because what I didn't realize is that as this plug slides in, at some point, not sure exactly how it happened, but I think I put the full battery voltage of the transmitter onto the signal pin, I think is probably what happened. And unfortunately one of my iomixers died. The microcontroller died by doing that. So what I have to do with this is I have to make sure that the radio is powered off when I plug this in, and then turn it on after that. So overall this is not a great long-term solution, but like I said, this is just a test, proof of concept or whatever, to confirm that the PPM output of the iomixer is working. So obviously the idea is you use the IMU that's on the iomixer, and it's going to be reading the pitch and yaw, actually. No, pitch and yaw. The first thing to point out is that if you're using one of these FlySky radios, you're not going to be able to do this with the standard firmware, because the standard firmware doesn't know how to read in a PPM signal from the trainer port and send that over the radio as part of the radio control. So I had to flash this with OpenTX, and so we've got OpenTX on there, and I'm not going to go into the details of how you set this up. I'm not very familiar with OpenTX myself. Actually, maybe I can give you a little bit more useful information here. So on the mixer page, you'll notice that channels 5 and 6 are coming from trainer 1 and trainer 2, and that's probably what you'll have to do to get this to work. On the receiving side, I just have channels 5 and 6 coming straight out of the receiver as normal PWM signals. That's the blue and the yellow wires there, and they go into the back of the gimbal like that. But you could of course have this a reading from the flight controller itself. If the flight controller has S-bus output, I think this gimbal can, actually it speaks multi-week protocol as well, doesn't it? So yeah, anyway, this is how I'm doing it here, just with regular PWM outputs from the receiver. Here's a page from the manual for the gimbal, and you can see we have 4 PWM inputs. Actually, the first one can also be S-bus or crossfire from a receiver, and then these UARTs here can be used to talk to the flight controller directly. And PWM 3 and 4 can be used for pitch and yaw control, which is what I'm doing directly from the standard PWM from the receiver. If we scroll down a little bit here, it says somewhere there are various ways to control it, and this is this plain PWM control is what I'm using. This is how the connector for the stereo jack was attached to the radio. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video, but I took some photos, so I thought I might as well put them in here. I just drilled a hole and poked the 3 main pins through that and epoxied it on to the back. Found the positions on the PCB where the trainer port connections were coming from, and that's about it. This is the configuration that's running on the iomixer for the pitch. It's quite simple. We take the pitch angle from the IMU, and at the output we want a PPM output, channel 1 in this case, and in the middle we do a little bit of scaling and shifting so that the value, instead of being a value in degrees, we want this to be a value between 0 and 1. So we divide it by 180 or 160, actually. Looks like I didn't quite want it to be 180. And then we shift it by adding 0.5 so that the middle of the range is at 0.5. And just for good luck, I've clamped it to be a value between 0 and 1 as well. And then that goes out to there. For the yaw, it's not quite so simple because I wanted to add a little push button switch to recenter the view, because the yaw tends to drift a little bit. There's no absolute reference like there is for pitch and roll. So in the case of this one, we have the IMU there for the yaw angle, but as well as that, we have a digital input for the button. And when that button is pressed, or the program has just started up, in other words, milliseconds is less than 200, so this condition will be true just after we've turned everything on. In either of those cases, we store the yaw value into this value called store. So that's going to be the value of the yaw angle at the moment that this value is true. And thereafter we just take the difference between the current yaw angle and the one that we stored when we pressed the button. So we're taking a relative value here instead of the value directly from the IMU itself. The rest of it's kind of the same, except the scaling is a little bit different because we want to scale this roughly around a range of 360 degrees, or 340 looks like, and then we shift it again and clamp it again. So that's the whole program that's running on the iomixer. Okay, I have everything powered up here just as a little demo, and I forgot to show you before, but there's a little clicky switch on here. That's what I'm using to recenter the gimbal, or to reset the 0 position. So if I tilt the goggles up and down, camera will pitch up and down like this, and then if we yaw, camera will yaw like that. And let's say the yaw is drifted, and we want that position of the goggles to be forwards on the plane. This is, of course, that's forwards on the plane there. Then I can just click my little button here, and it will jump to the forwards position for me. Here's a little clip that I took from a flight that I did before I added the head tracking. So this is just the gimbal with no inputs whatsoever. It's just trying to keep looking straight ahead. And you can see it's smoothing out some small vibrations in the plane movement, but it follows along with the large movements. So the head tracking is going to be working within this range. Alright, let's try this. Oh, I'm facing backwards. Hold on. Shit. Haha, there we go. Oh yeah. Nice. I think I'm a little bit lower than I should be perhaps, but yeah. Ah, this is pretty cool. Look all the way back. There's my house. Nice, man, this is great. Uh-oh. Do you see a problem here? I see a problem. This is not good. Looks like somebody forgot to remove the airspeed sensor thingy. I'm actually surprised it's doing so well, and last time I had a flight with the cover on the airspeed sensor, in any mode other than manual, it was just absolutely hopeless. And it was just lucky that I had manual on a switch available. That's the only reason this plane's still flying, probably. Get a little bit faster. Oh, what a thump! Jeebus! Alright, let me take that airspeed sensor thing off. And just double check, we've got nothing, no cover on the airspeed sensor this time. Much better. Wow. You look completely backwards? Yep. Pretty much. Quite a bit of obstruction from the fuselage of the plane here. I think I might put this on the Minitel in the future, so that it's, when I look down like this, it's going to be looking pretty much just straight down at the ground. But as far as a quick experiment goes, working pretty nicely. Haha. I feel like I want a zoom now. I feel like I'm too zoomed out. Now that I can like direct my attention towards something, I feel like I want to zoom into it more as well. Here's a few clips taken with the large hexacopter that I have. This is using a different gimbal. This gimbal has a slip ring on it, so it can rotate continuously around and around and around and around in the same direction. So I had to change the program on the iomixer a little bit for this to handle the fact that it doesn't really center itself in the same way that the one we just looked at does. But for the most part, it's kind of the same. This shed here, I went down to look at this shed and I almost crashed into the ground because I was descending a little bit quicker than I thought. So that's about it for this video, I guess. Still using just analog video here, so the footage is nothing fantastic really, is it? But I just wanted to make this sort of proof of concept, or test to make sure that this worked, because I actually made this PPM out feature about 3 years ago probably, and I'd never actually tested it. Every other feature that I have in the iomixer I have tested properly, so this was the odd one out that I hadn't been bothered to check. I checked it with my oscilloscope, of course, just to see that in theory it should work, but I hadn't done a practical test as I have done with everything else, and I wanted to make sure I had done a practical test before I told people that it was going to work. And it looks like it works, so yeah, I'm just going to put this video in my playlist that I'm building up of iomixer features, and it's probably not very interesting for anybody watching right now, but in the future when somebody comes to look at the playlist as a reference for PPM output, hopefully this video will help you a little bit. Anyway, that's it from me for now. See you later. Thanks for watching.